For 12,000 years, the Galactic Council believed they had found the perfect servants. Humans were weak, short-lived, and scattered across a single blue world on the galaxy's forgotten edge. When Earth fell silent after the Great Solar Storm of 2157, the Council simply forgot about them. They carved up human colonies like a feast among vultures. They took our technology, our resources, our very identity, and erased it from galactic records. The throne of Earth, humanity's rightful seat in the Council of Worlds, sat empty, gathering dust in the great halls of Kepler Prime. For 3 centuries, they believed humanity was extinct. They were wrong. Now, the descendants of Earth have returned from the void between stars, and they're not asking permission to reclaim what was stolen. They're not negotiating. They're not pleading. They're taking back their throne. This is the story of how a dead species reminded the galaxy why humans once ruled the stars, and why they never should have been forgotten. Prepare yourself for the rise of a species that refuses to stay buried. The morning shift on mining station Zirion 7 began like any other. Supervisor Kethvar checked the daily reports while sipping his morning stimulant, watching cargo ships drift lazily between the asteroid fields. The Zonari had run this operation for 60 years without incident, processing rare metals from the dead rocks that once orbited a forgotten human world. Another standard day, Kethvar muttered to his assistant, a nervous Thrax named Pilton. The 6-armed alien bobbed his head in agreement while organizing shipping manifests. They had no reason to expect anything different. This system had been classified as extinct human territory for over 2 centuries. The proximity alarm shattered their peaceful routine. Both aliens froze as the station's sensors detected something massive approaching from deep space. The readings made no sense. Whatever was coming registered as larger than a battlecruiser, but moved with impossible stealth. Only now, as it drew near, did their systems finally pick it up. Sir, Pilton's voice trembled as he stared at his instruments. You need to see this. Kethvar rushed to the main display, his blue skin paling as the image resolved. A ship unlike anything in current galactic records hung in space before them. It was angular and brutal, covered in armor plating that seemed to absorb light itself. Strange symbols were carved deep into its hull, symbols that looked disturbingly familiar. Run a database search on those markings, Kethvar ordered, though something cold was already forming in his stomach. The computer processed for several minutes before returning results that made both aliens step backward. The symbols matched ancient human military designations from before the Great Solar Storm. But that was impossible. Everyone knew humans had been wiped out when their star went unstable. Open a communication channel, Kethvar said, trying to keep his voice steady. This is mining station Zirion 7 to unknown vessel. Please identify yourself and state your purpose in this system. Static filled the channel for long moments. Then, a voice responded, deep, calm, and unmistakably human. This is Captain Sarah Chun of the Earth Expeditionary Force vessel Vindication. We're here to reclaim what belongs to us. Kethvar nearly dropped his stimulant cup. Earth Expeditionary Force. That's impossible. Earth was destroyed centuries ago. A laugh came through the speakers, not cruel, but filled with dark amusement. Reports of our death were greatly exaggerated. This system belongs to the Sol Confederation. You have 12 hours to evacuate before we begin reclamation operations. Now wait just a moment, Kethvar sputtered, finding his voice. This system was legally acquired by the Zilnari Mining Consortium after the human extinction event. We have full council authorization to operate here. The pause that followed lasted long enough to make both aliens sweat. When the human voice returned, it carried an edge that made their skin crawl. The council had no authority to give away what was never theirs. Earth never surrendered its territorial claims. We simply went dark for a while. More ships began appearing on the sensors, dozens of them, all bearing the same dark armor and ancient human markings. They moved in perfect formation, surrounding the mining station like predators circling prey. Kethvar's hands shook as he activated the emergency broadcast system. This was bigger than a mining dispute. If humans were really back from extinction, the entire galaxy needed to know. This is mining station Zirion 7 broadcasting emergency alert to all council forces. He transmitted on wideband frequencies. We have encountered ships claiming to represent the extinct human empire, requesting immediate military assistance. The response came not from the council fleet, but from Captain Chun. I wouldn't count on help arriving, Supervisor. The council's going to be rather busy dealing with similar situations across what used to be human space. On the tactical display, more alerts began flashing. Similar encounters were being reported from mining operations, research stations, and colony worlds throughout the sector. Everywhere the council had expanded into former human territory, these mysterious ships were appearing. Pilton pulled up the historical records with trembling hands. Sir, the database says humans once controlled over 300 systems before the Great Solar Storm. If they're reclaiming all of them, Kethvar didn't need his assistant to finish the thought. 300 systems represented nearly a quarter of the galaxy's most resource-rich territories. The economic implications alone would destabilize the entire council. Captain Chun, he said into the communicator, surely we can reach some accommodation. The Zonari people have invested enormous resources in developing these facilities. Perhaps we can negotiate a joint operation? The time for negotiation ended when you carved up our empire like a carcass, came the cold reply. But I'm not unreasonable. Your people have 11 hours and 43 minutes to gather their belongings and leave. Any mining equipment or infrastructure you leave behind will be considered payment for 3 centuries of illegal occupation. This is piracy. No, Captain Chun said, and for the first time her voice carried real emotion, a deep, burning anger that had been held in check for far too long. This is justice. The communication channel closed, leaving the mining station in tense silence. Around them, the human fleet held position like dark promises of violence. Kethvar realized he was facing something unprecedented in galactic history, an extinct species that wasn't extinct at all. Pilton, send a priority message to council headquarters on Kepler Prime, he ordered. Tell them the humans are back, and they want their empire returned. As his assistant composed the message, Kethvar stared at the massive ship hanging in space before them. Something about its design suggested it had been built for war, serious, prolonged warfare against technologically advanced opponents. These weren't desperate survivors returning from exile. These were conquerors. The historical records painted humans as a relatively peaceful species before their supposed extinction. They had been explorers and traders, not warriors. But 3 centuries of believing themselves forgotten might have changed that. Whatever had happened to humanity during their long absence, they had clearly spent the time preparing for this moment. More alerts flooded in from across the sector. The pattern was identical everywhere. Human ships appearing without warning, demanding immediate evacuation of their former territories. No violence yet, but the threat was implicit in every word. Kefar began organizing the evacuation, but his mind raced with larger implications. The council had built its current power structure on the assumption that humanity was gone forever. Earth's seat in the governing body had remained officially vacant, but practically forgotten. Trade routes, mining rights, colonization permits, everything had been redistributed based on that assumption. If humans really were reclaiming their old empire, it would trigger the greatest political crisis in galactic history. Wars had been fought over single systems. Humanity was demanding hundreds. Sir, Hilton interrupted his thoughts. We're receiving similar reports from mining operations in the Centauri sector, the Vega colonies, and the Proxima stations. It's happening everywhere humans use to control territory. Kefar nodded grimly. This wasn't a random encounter or isolated incident. This was a coordinated campaign launched simultaneously across dozens of systems. It spoke to planning, organization, and resources that suggested humanity hadn't just survived their supposed extinction. They had thrived somewhere beyond galactic knowledge. Where have they been all this time? He wondered aloud. As if in response to his question, long-range sensors detected something that made his blood freeze. Beyond the immediate fleet, massive structures were approaching, not ships, but what appeared to be mobile space stations or orbital habitats. These were clearly designed for permanent occupation, not temporary raids. The humans weren't just reclaiming their territory. They were moving back in to stay. With growing dread, Kefar realized he was witnessing the opening moves of what might become the greatest shift of power in galactic history. The species everyone thought was dead had returned with a vengeance, and they clearly had no intention of asking permission to take back what they believed was rightfully theirs. The galaxy was about to rediscover why humans had once been considered a force to be respected and feared. The emergency session of the Galactic Council convened within hours of receiving reports from across human space. Representatives from dozens of species crowded into the Great Chamber on Kepler Prime, their voices creating a cacophony of panic and outrage. At the center of it all sat the ornate throne that had remained empty for 3 centuries, Earth's seat in the governing body. Chancellor Vorthak, a massive Drugan with 4 arms and ceremonial scarring across his face, called for order with increasingly desperate gestures. The reports flooding and painted an impossible picture that challenged everything they thought they knew about galactic politics. Silence, he finally roared, his voice amplified by the chamber's acoustics. We will address this crisis systematically. Admiral Zexhai of the Altarian Defense Force stood to present the military assessment. Her silver skin gleamed under the chamber's lights as she activated the holographic display at the center of the room. As of 6 hours ago, we have confirmed human military presence in 47 star systems, she announced. All of these systems were previously under human control before the Great Solar Storm of 2157. The forces involved appear to number in the thousands of vessels, suggesting a fleet larger than any single council member possesses. Gasps echoed through the chamber. The implications were staggering. Even the most powerful council species maintained fleets of only a few hundred capital ships. If humans had indeed assembled thousands of vessels, they represented a military force unlike anything the galaxy had seen in centuries. That's impossible, declared Representative Quillarn of the Felinoid Confederation. Our intelligence networks would have detected such a massive buildup. Where have they been hiding? Admiral Zexhai's expression was grim. Our best analysis suggests they've been operating from beyond the galactic rim. The technology we're observing appears to be based on human designs, but advanced far beyond anything in our historical records. They've clearly continued developing during their absence. Chancellor Vorthak leaned forward, his massive frame casting shadows across the chamber floor. What are their demands? Complete withdrawal from all formerly human territories within standard cycles, the Admiral replied. No negotiations, no compensation for existing investments. They're treating the last 3 centuries as an illegal occupation that they intend to end immediately. The chamber erupted in outraged voices. The economic implications were catastrophic. Hundreds of worlds, mining operations, research facilities, and trade routes would be lost overnight. Some species had built their entire economies around territories they'd claimed after humanity's supposed extinction. This is extortion, shouted Trade Minister Hexlon of the Crystalline Combine. We invested trillions of credits developing those worlds. They can't simply demand we abandon everything. They're not demanding, Admiral Zexhai corrected. They're taking. Our forces have attempted to respond to several incidents. The results have been concerning. The holographic display shifted to show the wreckage of 3 Council patrol vessels floating in space. The ships had been torn apart with surgical precision, their weapon systems destroyed first to prevent effective resistance. The engagement lasted less than 4 minutes. Admiral Zexhai continued. Human vessels demonstrated technology we don't understand. Their ships absorbed our energy weapons without apparent damage, and their return fire cut through our best shields like they weren't there. A heavy silence fell over the chamber. The Council's military superiority had been unquestioned for centuries. The idea that humans, supposedly primitive humans, could outfight their combined forces was almost incomprehensible. Representative Sylvana of the Aquatic Federation rose from her environmental pod. Perhaps we should consider their perspective, she said carefully. If they truly never surrendered their territorial claims, then, legally speaking, they were extinct. Chancellor Vorthak slammed one of his 4 fists on his desk. You cannot claim rights for a dead species. But they weren't dead, Sylvana persisted. They were simply absent. There's a significant legal difference under galactic law. The Chancellor's expression darkened. This was exactly the kind of legal complexity that could tie up the Council in debates for decades, while human forces continued their expansion. Already, reports indicated they were beginning to establish permanent installations in reclaimed systems. What of their original seat? Asked Representative Dalmorth of the Silicon Collective. All eyes turned to the empty throne that had dominated the chamber's center for 3 centuries. Technically, Earth never formally withdrew from the Council. Admiral Zexhai nodded reluctantly. Our legal experts confirm that Earth's membership was never officially terminated. When contact was lost after the Great Solar Storm, their seat was simply declared vacant pending restoration of communications. The implications sent a chill through the Assembly. If Earth's Council membership was still valid, their representatives could theoretically return and demand their voting rights be restored immediately. Given their apparent military strength, they might have the power to enforce such demands. We need more information, Chancellor Vorthak declared. Admiral, what do we know about their current leadership structure? Very little, she admitted. They're operating under the banner of something called the Earth Expeditionary Force, but we don't know if that represents their entire government or just their military arm. What we do know is that their coordination across multiple systems suggests a highly sophisticated command structure. Representative THYSS Era of the insectoid hives clicked her mandibles nervously. My people have encountered similar organizational efficiency in only one context, preparation for total war. These humans have been planning this campaign for a very long time. The truth of that observation settled over the chamber like a cold fog. This wasn't a spontaneous uprising or desperate grab for resources. The simultaneous appearance of human forces across dozens of systems spoke to decades, possibly centuries, of careful planning and preparation. They've been watching us, Admiral Zexhai said quietly. All this time, they've been observing how we divided up their territories, studying our military capabilities, planning their return. We thought they were extinct, but they were gathering intelligence and building their strength. Chancellor Vorthak stood and began pacing, his heavy footsteps echoing in the vast chamber. Options. I want to hear options for dealing with this crisis. Military response is inadvisable, Admiral Zexhai said immediately. Early engagements suggest their technology significantly outclasses our own. A direct confrontation would likely result in catastrophic losses for Council forces. Economic sanctions? Difficult to implement against a force that's been self-sufficient for 3 centuries, replied Trade Minister Hexlon. They're not dependent on our trade networks. Diplomatic negotiation? They've shown no interest in compromise so far, Representative Silvana observed. Their communications have been polite, but absolute. They're not asking for anything. They're taking what they claim is already theirs. Chancellor Vorthak stopped pacing and stared at the empty throne. What about recognition? We could formally acknowledge their return, restore their council seat, and attempt to negotiate from a position of legal equality. That would legitimize their territorial claims, Representative Dalmorth pointed out. Once we acknowledge their right to return, we implicitly accept their right to reclaim their former territories. The alternative might be a war we can't win, Admiral Zexhai said bluntly. As the representatives debated, none noticed the small observation craft that had been monitoring their emergency session from the outer system. Captain Sarah Chun reviewed the intelligence her ship had gathered, a slight smile playing at the corners of her mouth. The council was reacting exactly as human strategists had predicted. Panic, legal arguments, desperate searches for alternatives to direct confrontation. 3 centuries of assumed superiority had left them unprepared for a challenge they couldn't simply overwhelm with superior numbers. Ma'am, her communications officer reported, Admiral Harrison requests an update on council response patterns. Tell the Admiral that Phase 1 is proceeding according to plan, Chen replied. The council is paralyzed by indecision and legal confusion. They're not prepared for what comes next. She turned to her tactical officer. Status report on reclamation operations? 73% of primary targets have been secured without significant resistance. Local forces are withdrawing rather than engage our fleets. Civilian populations are being relocated according to established protocols. Chen nodded approvingly. The human command had hoped to reclaim their territories with minimal bloodshed, and so far that strategy was working. But she knew this was only the beginning. The real test would come when the council finally overcame their shock and attempted to organize a coordinated response. Prepare to implement Phase 2, she ordered. It's time to remind the galaxy who we used to be, and show them who we've become. Back in the council chamber, Chancellor Vorthak finally reached his decision. We will dispatch a diplomatic envoy to establish contact with human leadership. Admiral Zexhai, select your most experienced negotiator and prepare a proposal for peaceful coexistence. As the emergency session dissolved into smaller planning groups, none of the council representatives noticed that their communications were being monitored. The humans who had once been dismissed as extinct were very much alive, and they had learned to be extremely thorough in their preparations. The galaxy was about to discover that humanity's 3-century absence had transformed them from explorers into something far more dangerous. Survivors who had spent every day of their exile planning their return. The diplomatic vessel Harmony's Edge approached the coordinates provided by human forces with careful precision. Ambassador Teleris of the Peaceful Mediation Corps stood at the observation deck, watching as something extraordinary took shape in the viewscreen ahead. What appeared to be a massive space station hung in the void, but its architecture was unlike anything in current galactic records. The structure combined familiar human geometric patterns with technologies that seemed impossibly advanced. Energy barriers shimmered around its hull, and weapon emplacements that could devastate entire fleets were positioned with mathematical precision. This wasn't just a station, it was a fortress that could serve as a command center for conquering galaxies. Ambassador, his aide whispered, the energy readings from that structure are off our charts. Whatever they're using for power generation is beyond our current understanding. Teleris nodded grimly. The peaceful mediation specialist had successfully negotiated treaties between dozens of species, but he had never faced a situation quite like this. The humans weren't angry refugees seeking new homes or desperate survivors begging for assistance. They were conquerors returning to claim an empire, and they held all the advantages. A new voice crackled through the communication system. Calm, professional, but carrying an undertone that suggested vast resources and absolute confidence. Diplomatic vessel. This is Admiral Marcus Harrison of the Earth Expeditionary Force. You are cleared to dock at Base 7. Be advised that this station operates under human military protocols. The docking process was smoother than Talaris had expected, with guidance systems that seemed to anticipate his ship's movements. As they sealed into the docking bay, he couldn't help but notice the obvious defensive preparations. Armed guards in advanced armor stood at attention, and weapons emplacements covered every approach. The airlock opened to reveal a human woman in a crisp military uniform, her bearing suggesting years of combat experience. Behind her stood an honor guard that moved with the precision of professional soldiers who had seen real warfare. Ambassador Talaris, I presume, she said, extending her hand in the traditional human greeting. I'm Captain Sarah Chun. Admiral Harrison is waiting to meet with you. As they walked through the station's corridors, Talaris observed details that painted a troubling picture of human capabilities. The technology was clearly advanced, but, more importantly, the infrastructure suggested a massive industrial base. These weren't desperate exiles operating from hidden bases. They had built something approaching a shadow empire. Impressive facility, he commented carefully. How long have you been constructing installations like this? Captain Chin's smile held no warmth. Long enough, Ambassador. Long enough. The Admiral's quarters were spartanly furnished but included a holographic star map that made Talaris pause in shock. It showed the entire galaxy with human territorial claims highlighted in blue. The sheer scope was breathtaking. Over 400 systems marked as belonging to humanity, including many that the Council considered vital to galactic stability. Admiral Harrison stood with his back to the entrance, studying the display. He was a tall man with graying hair and scars that spoke of personal combat experience. When he turned to face his guest, his eyes held the calm certainty of someone who had never learned to doubt victory. Ambassador, he said, gesturing to a chair. Thank you for coming. I trust your journey here was enlightening. Talaris settled himself carefully, acutely aware that he was in the presence of military leadership that commanded resources capable of destabilizing the entire galaxy. Admiral Harrison, I'm here representing the Galactic Council's desire to find a peaceful resolution to current territorial disputes. Disputes. Admiral Harrison's eyebrows rose slightly. Ambassador, there are no disputes. We are reclaiming territory that was stolen from us during our absence. The only question is whether that process continues peacefully or requires more direct methods. With respect, Admiral, the Council legally redistributed unoccupied territories after Earth went silent for over 2 centuries. Significant resources have been invested in developing those worlds. Admiral Harrison activated the holographic display, zooming in on a system where human and Council forces currently faced each other in tense standoff. Let me share some history that apparently didn't make it into your official records, Ambassador. The display showed detailed sensor logs from the Great Solar Storm that had supposedly destroyed Earth. As Talaris studied the data, his expression grew increasingly troubled. The readings indicated massive energy discharges, but they followed patterns that suggested artificial manipulation rather than natural stellar phenomena. Your people weren't concerned about humanity's welfare when our star began showing signs of instability, Admiral Harrison continued. In fact, several Council species actively prevented evacuation efforts while positioning themselves to claim our territories the moment we were gone. Talaris stared at the evidence in growing horror. The data suggested that what the Council had recorded as a natural disaster might have been something far more sinister. You're suggesting the Council deliberately caused the destruction of Earth? I'm not suggesting anything, Admiral Harrison replied calmly. I'm telling you that we have complete records of what happened. The solar manipulation technology came from your own people, Ambassador. The crystalline combine, to be specific. The accusation hit Talaris like a physical blow. If true, it meant that humanity's supposed extinction had been an act of genocide designed to open up their territories for colonization. The legal implications were staggering, and the moral ones were even worse. That's impossible, he stammered. The crystalline combine are peaceful traders. They would never, wouldn't they? Admiral Harrison manipulated the display to show financial records spanning the period before and after Earth's silence. Examine the economic data, Ambassador. Look at which species benefited most from humanity's disappearance. The evidence was damning. The crystalline combine had indeed profited enormously from accessing former human trade routes and mining operations. What's more, they had begun positioning assets in human space months before the alleged solar storm, suggesting advanced knowledge of coming events. Even if this is true, Talaris said weakly, it happened 3 centuries ago. The current generation of galactic leadership had nothing to do with those events. But they continue to profit from them, Captain Chen interjected. Every day that passes, Council species extract wealth from worlds that belong to us. Every mining operation, every colony, every trade route, all of it built on the foundation of attempted genocide. Admiral Harrison leaned forward, his expression growing harder. Ambassador, your Council had 3 centuries to investigate what happened to Earth. Instead, you carved up our territories like vultures and tried to erase us from galactic memory. Did you really think we wouldn't notice? Where were you? Talaris asked desperately. If you survived, why didn't you make contact? Why wait 3 centuries to return? The Admiral's smile was cold as winter space. We were exactly where you left us, Ambassador. Earth wasn't destroyed, it was moved. The same technology used to destabilize our star was turned to our advantage. We spent 3 centuries traveling beyond the galactic rim, building our strength, and planning for this day. Talaris felt the bottom drop out of his diplomatic hopes. If Earth had literally been displaced from its original location, it meant humanity had access to technology that could move entire planets. The military implications were terrifying to contemplate. We learned a great deal during our exile, Admiral Harrison continued. We learned that the galaxy is a dangerous place for species that trust too easily. We learned that survival requires strength, preparation, and the will to do whatever is necessary to protect your people. Most importantly, we learned that justice delayed is not justice denied, if you're patient enough. What do you want? Talaris asked quietly. What we've always wanted, our rightful place in the galaxy, Admiral Harrison replied. The difference is that we're no longer interested in asking permission. Earth's throne in the council chamber has sat vacant long enough. We're coming home to claim it. The admiral gestured to the holographic display, which now showed human fleets moving into position around dozens of worlds simultaneously. This conversation is a courtesy, Ambassador. We're informing the council of our intentions, not seeking their approval. Teleris studied the tactical display with growing dread. The human fleet movements suggested a coordinated campaign that had been planned down to the smallest detail. Worse, the sheer number of vessels involved indicated industrial capacity that rivaled the entire council's combined production. The council will never accept the loss of so much territory, he warned. This could trigger the largest war in galactic history. Yes, Admiral Harrison agreed calmly. It could. The question you need to take back to your council is simple. Do they want to fight a war they cannot win over territories they never had the right to claim? Captain Shun activated a smaller display showing real-time updates from across human space. Phase 2 of our reclamation operations begins in 48 hours, Ambassador. I suggest you use that time wisely. As Teleris prepared to leave, Admiral Harrison offered one final observation. Your council made one critical error, Ambassador. They assumed that the victims of their genocide would stay buried. But humanity has always been remarkably difficult to kill permanently. The diplomatic vessel departed the human station carrying news that would shake the galactic government to its core. In his private quarters, Ambassador Teleris stared at the evidence he'd been given, knowing that everything he thought he understood about galactic history might be a lie. Behind him, Admiral Harrison watched the departing ship and smiled coldly. The council was about to learn that humanity had spent 3 centuries perfecting the art of patience and preparing for the day when patience would no longer be necessary. The emergency council session that followed Ambassador Teleris' return was unlike anything in the governing body's history. The evidence he presented had shattered comfortable assumptions and revealed uncomfortable truths that many representatives wished they could ignore. The great chamber buzzed with nervous energy as species that had considered themselves allies suddenly viewed each other with suspicion. Chancellor Vorthax studied the holographic evidence with growing unease. If the human claims were accurate, the very foundation of current galactic order rested on genocide and theft. The legal implications were staggering, but the immediate military threat demanded attention first. Admiral Zexhai, what is the current tactical situation? He asked. The silver-skinned Altarian stood at the central display, her usual composure cracked by the magnitude of what they faced. Human forces have established complete control over 87 star systems in the past 72 hours. Their expansion continues at a rate that suggests unlimited reserves and perfect coordination. The holographic map showed the human advance like a spreading infection of blue markers across territories the Council had controlled for centuries. The speed and efficiency of their operations spoke to military precision that bordered on the supernatural. Our resistance efforts have been unsuccessful, Admiral Zexhai continued reluctantly. Every engagement results in total defeat for our forces. Their technology appears to be at least 2 centuries ahead of our best capabilities. Representative Quillarn of the Felinoid Confederation leaped to her feet, her fur bristling with agitation. This is impossible. No single species could advance so far beyond the galactic technological baseline. They had 3 centuries of uninterrupted development, Admiral Zexhai replied. While we were stagnating in comfortable superiority, they were pushing the boundaries of science out of pure survival necessity. The results speak for themselves. Trade Minister Hexlon's crystalline form flickered with nervous energy patterns. The economic impact is already catastrophic. 3/4 of our rare element mining operations are in human-claimed territories. If we lose access to those resources, the entire galactic economy could collapse. More importantly, interrupted Representative Sylvana, if their historical evidence is accurate, we're dealing with the survivors of attempted genocide. The moral authority is entirely on their side. Chancellor Vorthax slammed his desk with enough force to crack the reinforced surface. Moral authority doesn't matter if they destroy galactic civilization in pursuit of revenge, doesn't it? The voice came from the chamber's main entrance, where a figure in human military uniform stood waiting. No alarms had sounded, no guards had announced an arrival. The stranger had simply appeared in the most secure facility in the galaxy, as if walking through an unlocked door. Security forces rushed forward, weapons drawn, but stopped when they realized their target showed no signs of hostility. The human stood calmly, hands visible and empty, wearing the same dark uniform they'd observed on every human vessel. I am Colonel David Murphy of the Earth Expeditionary Force, he announced, his voice carrying clearly through the vast chamber. Admiral Harrison sends his greetings and an invitation to witness the restoration of justice. Chancellor Vorthax found his voice first. How did you get in here? This facility has the most advanced security in the galaxy. Colonel Murphy smiled politely. Your security systems are based on technology we helped develop 3 centuries ago. We've had considerable time to study their weaknesses. The implications sent chills through every representative present. If humans could infiltrate the Council's most secure facility at will, nowhere in the galaxy was safe from their reach. What do you want? Admiral Zexhai demanded, though her hand rested unconsciously on her sidearm. To extend an invitation, Colonel Murphy replied. In 6 hours, we will be conducting a demonstration of Earth's technological capabilities. Given the galaxy's apparent skepticism about our legitimate claims, Admiral Harrison feels a practical display might be more persuasive than further diplomatic discussions. The holographic display activated without any visible command, showing a star system on the galactic rim where a Council military installation orbited a barren world. The base housed over 10,000 personnel and represented one of their most advanced defensive positions. Fort Kepler Station serves no strategic purpose except to project Council power into empty space, Colonel Murphy observed. It's also built on the ruins of a human research facility that was destroyed during our forced exile. We've decided to reclaim that location. Chancellor Vorthax leaned forward, his massive frame radiating tension. That station is defended by the 7th Fleet. Over 300 vessels and planetary defense systems that could stop anything short of a full-scale invasion. Yes, Colonel Murphy agreed pleasantly. It should provide an adequate demonstration of current human military capabilities. The casual confidence in his voice was more terrifying than any threat. Admiral Zexhai studied the tactical displays, trying to calculate how many ships humanity would need to assault such a position. The numbers she reached made her stomach turn. You're talking about a major military engagement, she said. Thousands of casualties on both sides. Not necessarily, Colonel Murphy replied. We're hoping for a bloodless resolution. If the station's personnel evacuate within the next 5 hours, no lives need be lost. If they choose to resist. He shrugged eloquently. Representative Dalmorth of the Silicon Collective processed this information with digital precision. You're offering a demonstration rather than a battle. You believe you can take the station without significant resistance. We know we can, Colonel Murphy corrected. The question is whether your people will recognize reality quickly enough to avoid unnecessary casualties. Chancellor Vorthak stood abruptly, his forearms gesturing with agitation. This is madness. Even if you could somehow overcome our defenses, such an attack would unite every species in the galaxy against you. Colonel Murphy's expression grew serious for the first time. Chancellor, with respect, the galaxy has been united against us for 3 centuries. The only thing that's changed is that we're no longer pretending it doesn't matter. He gestured to the evidence Ambassador Talaris had brought back. Your people tried to erase us from existence. They stole our worlds, murdered our colonies, and attempted to write us out of galactic history. Did you really think we would return seeking friendship and cooperation? The chamber fell into uncomfortable silence as representatives grappled with the truth of his words. The comfortable fiction that humanity's disappearance had been a natural disaster was crumbling under the weight of evidence, leaving them face to face with the consequences of their predecessors' actions. What about innocent civilians? Representative Sylvana asked quietly. Many species had no involvement in the events you describe, and they have nothing to fear from us, Colonel Murphy replied. We're not seeking genocide in return for genocide. We want justice, restoration of our territories, and recognition of our rightful place in galactic society. Species that accept these terms will find us reasonable neighbors, and those that don't. Colonel Murphy's smile returned, but it held no warmth. Will find us to be extremely unreasonable enemies. Admiral Zexhai studied the tactical projections one more time, hoping to find some flaw in the human plan. What she saw instead was a military operation planned with such precision that every possible contingency seemed to have been considered. Colonel, she said finally, what exactly are you asking us to witness? The restoration of Earth's rightful place in the galaxy, he replied, beginning with the reclamation of Fort Kepler Station and ending with humanity's return to this very chamber. He gestured toward the empty throne that had dominated the center of the room for 3 centuries. Earth's seat has been vacant too long. It's time for us to come home. The holographic display shifted to show real-time feeds from across human-controlled space. Massive construction projects were underway on dozens of worlds, suggesting preparation for permanent reoccupation rather than temporary military occupation. This isn't just about territory, Representative Tietwazero observed, her insectoid features showing recognition of larger patterns. You're rebuilding your entire civilization in claimed space. Of course, Colonel Murphy confirmed. Did you think we would remain homeless forever? We're not raiders or nomads. We're a spacefaring civilization reclaiming our birthright. Chancellor Vorthak slumped in his chair, the weight of the crisis bearing down on him. What are your terms for ending this campaign? Simple, Colonel Murphy replied. Full recognition of Earth's territorial claims, restoration of our council seat with voting rights, and reparations for 3 centuries of illegal occupation. In return, we'll limit our expansion to historically human space and maintain peaceful relations with species that respect our sovereignty. And if we refuse? Colonel Murphy glanced at the chronometer on his wrist. Then, in 4 hours and 37 minutes, you'll witness the opening move of a war that will reshape the galaxy. The choice, as always, is yours. As he prepared to leave, he offered one final observation. Humanity learned something important during our exile, Chancellor. We learned that the galaxy respects only strength. For 3 centuries, we've been building that strength. Now it's time to show what we've accomplished. The chamber doors closed behind him, leaving the council representatives alone with the terrible knowledge that they faced an opponent who held every advantage. Outside, the empty throne seemed to mock their predicament. A reminder that justice delayed had become justice armed with the power to enforce itself. The observation deck of the council vessel Diplomatic Unity provided a perfect view of Fort Kepler Station, though Admiral Zexhai wished she were anywhere else in the galaxy. Around her, representatives from every major species watched in tense silence as the deadline approached. For hours had passed since Colonel Murphy's ultimatum, and the station's commander had made it clear that the 7th Fleet would not retreat. Station personnel report full readiness, her tactical officer announced. All defensive systems are online, and the fleet has assumed combat formation. Admiral Zexhai nodded grimly. Fort Kepler represented the pinnacle of Council military engineering, with shields that could withstand stellar bombardment and weapons capable of destroying planets. If humanity could overcome such defenses, then no Council position anywhere would be safe. Long-range sensors are detecting something, the tactical officer continued, his voice carrying a note of confusion. It's hard to describe. The main display activated, showing the deep space around the fort. At first, nothing seemed different. Then, reality itself began to warp and twist, as if the very fabric of space was being manipulated by invisible forces. What are we seeing? Chancellor Vorthak demanded. Unknown, sir. The energy signatures are unlike anything in our databases. The distortion grew larger, reality bending like heated metal around a point of impossible darkness. Then, without warning, something vast emerged from the twisted space. Not a ship, but something that defied easy categorization. The human vessel was the size of a small moon, its surface covered in geometric patterns that seemed to pulse with their own internal light. It appeared solid, yet sensors indicated that parts of it existed in dimensions beyond normal 3-dimensional space. Blessed ancestors, whispered Representative Sylvana. What kind of technology could create something like that? Admiral Zexhai was studying her instruments with growing disbelief. The energy output from that object exceeds anything we thought was theoretically possible. It's generating power equivalent to a star. More distortions appeared throughout the system as additional human vessels emerged from whatever dimensional space they had been traveling through. Each ship was unique in design but shared the same impossible technology that seemed to bend reality around their hulls. Station commander is requesting immediate reinforcement, the communications officer reported. He's asking for evacuation authorization. Chancellor Vorthak stared at the display in growing horror. The fort that had seemed impregnable moments ago now looked like a child's toy floating before forces that operated beyond galactic understanding of physics. A new voice filled the communication channels, calm, professional, carrying the absolute confidence of someone who had never known defeat. Fort Kepler Station, this is Admiral Marcus Harrison of the Earth Expeditionary Force. You are occupying territory belonging to the Sol Confederation. You have 30 minutes to evacuate all personnel and prepare for peaceful transfer of the facility. The station commander's reply crackled with defiance and barely controlled fear. Admiral Harrison, this is General Korthran commanding Fort Kepler. This station is Sovereign Council territory. We will not abandon our post. General, Admiral Harrison's voice carried a note of genuine regret. I hope you would be more reasonable. Very well. You have witnessed the arrival of our forces. Do you still wish to resist? The tactical display showed the human fleet taking position around the station with movements that seemed to ignore basic laws of physics. Ships that should have required hours to change position simply appeared in new locations, as if distance was a concept they could choose to ignore. We will not surrender, General Korthran declared. All council vessels, assume attack formation. Prepare to engage the enemy. Admiral Zexhai watched the deployment with professional admiration and personal dread. The 7th Fleet moved with precision born of decades of training, their formation designed to maximize firepower while maintaining defensive strength. It was a textbook response that should have given any attacker pause. Fleet is in position and ready to engage, her tactical officer reported. Fire, General Korthran ordered. The space around Fort Kepler erupted in violence as 300 council vessels opened fire simultaneously. Energy beams capable of cracking planets converged on the human fleet, while the station's defensive arrays added their firepower to the devastating barrage. The light was so intense that the observation deck shields automatically darkened to protect the viewers. When the glare faded, everyone leaned forward to assess the damage to the human forces. The enemy fleet hung in space completely unharmed. Impossible, Admiral Zexhai breathed. Nothing could survive that level of concentrated fire. As they watched in stunned silence, the human vessels began to respond. But, instead of returning fire, they did something that challenged every assumption about space warfare. Reality around each council ship began to twist and warp, the same dimensional distortions that had heralded the human arrival. What are they doing? Chancellor Vorthak demanded. Unknown, sir, came the helpless reply. Our sensors can't interpret the energy patterns. One by one, the council vessels simply ceased to exist. Not destroyed, not vaporized, but erased as if they had never been there at all. The massive 7th Fleet, pride of the council military, vanished into whatever dimensional space the humans commanded. Life signs, Admiral Zexhai said urgently. Are there life signs? Detecting all personnel from the missing vessels, her tactical officer replied with obvious relief. They're aboard the human ships, apparently unharmed. Fort Kepler Station now floated alone in space, its defenders gone, and its weapons useless against an enemy that operated beyond the boundaries of understood science. Fort Kepler Station, Admiral Harrison's voice returned, still carrying that note of infinite patience. General Korthran, do you require additional demonstration of our capabilities? The silence stretched for long minutes before the general's broken voice responded. We surrender. Beginning evacuation immediately. Thank you, General. Your people will be transported safely to council space. The station will be preserved as a historical monument to this day. As the evacuation proceeded with supernatural efficiency, Colonel Murphy's voice came through the diplomatic vessel's communications. Honored representatives, you have witnessed the restoration of human sovereignty over a single facility. This same process will be repeated across every system that rightfully belongs to us. Representative Dalmorth processed the implications with digital precision. You've developed technology that renders conventional warfare obsolete. No military force in the galaxy could resist such capabilities. That was the idea, Colonel Murphy confirmed. 3 centuries of exile taught us that survival requires more than good intentions and diplomatic protests. It requires the absolute power to enforce justice. Chancellor Vorthak found his voice, though it trembled with the weight of what he'd witnessed. What you're proposing would completely reshape galactic civilization. The balance of power that has maintained peace for centuries was built on the grave of our people. Colonel Murphy interrupted. That false peace is ending, Chancellor. The only question is whether its replacement will be built through cooperation or conquest. Admiral Zexhai studied the tactical readings one more time, hoping to understand even a fraction of what she'd observed. Your dimensional manipulation technology, where did it come from? Necessity, came the simple reply. When your star system is destroyed and your planet moved beyond the galactic rim, you learn to think creatively about the nature of space and time. We had excellent teachers in survival. The implications sent chills through everyone present. If humans had literally moved their entire world beyond the galaxy and developed technology that could manipulate space-time itself, they represented a force that could reshape reality according to their will. What happens now? Representative Sylvana asked quietly. Now you return to the council with the knowledge of what you've seen, Colonel Murphy replied. Tomorrow, Earth's legitimate representative will return to claim our seat in the galactic government. The day after that, we begin the process of rebuilding what was stolen from us. And if the council refuses to recognize your claims, then you'll discover what 3 centuries of preparation can accomplish when guided by absolute determination, came the cold response. As the diplomatic vessel prepared to depart, the representatives took one last look at Fort Kepler Station. The massive installation was being transformed before their eyes, human construction crews working with the same impossible efficiency their military had displayed. Humanity is home. Colonel Murphy's voice followed them into hyperspace. Earth's throne will be vacant no longer. In the council chamber on Kepler Prime, the empty seat that had gathered dust for 3 centuries seemed to pulse with anticipation. The galaxy was about to rediscover why the throne had remained waiting, and why its rightful occupants had never truly been gone. The age of human exile was ending. The age of human supremacy was about to begin, and the galaxy would never be the same.